I was a little bit disappointed with AMD's CES keynote this morning. I don't know if you saw it. If you're a fan of the tech world, if you're hugely obsessed with the tech world like I am, you might have set an alarm to make sure you got up at 9 a.m. to watch the thing. I say that like that's early. I know that's not. And I was pretty bummed out at first because there were a lot of leaks that made it appear like a lot of really impressive stuff was going to happen. And of course, everyone was saying, well, calm down with the hype, calm down with the hype. But AMD's in a point in the market right now, I think we can all agree, where Intel's kind of on their back foot, and they've been on their back foot for a while, and the thing they announced at CES was like 10 nanometer mobile chips. So not the most exciting. So everyone was like, if AMD just comes out and dominates this presentation, that would be really cool. It was kind of a weak presentation. It was mostly about GPUs, and I have a GPU I like, and my 1050 Ti does fine for me for what I use it for. A little bit of Stardew Valley and editing videos. So I don't have any interest in that. And if you do care, that's interesting. I want to know what you thought about that. The GPU they launched was it's called the Radeon 7. It's not called the Vega 7, but it's got a V and a 2, and it's 7 nanometer, but it's also like V and then like Vega 2. It's this whole, I don't know, that's not a pun, is it? It's a whole wordplay situation with the Radeon 7. $700, 16 gigabytes of HBM RAM. So they compared it a lot to the 2070, the RTX, and it looked like it did a little bit better, maybe a couple percent better than that. Of course, AMD's probably showing some biased benchmarks. Everyone does. That's okay. But it doesn't have any of the DLS, the deep learning super sampling stuff, or the ray tracing cores, so it just kind of depends on what you want. I think a lot of people are upset about the $700 price tag, particularly NVIDIA also announced the RTX 2060 at $350. We don't know if that's true. They certainly lied about the prices when they launched the rest of the RTX, or misspoke by $200, so maybe it'll be $550. But you would think for $350, the RTX 2060 probably does what most gamers want out of a GPU. If you're in the content creation realm, you may care for the AMD one more. I don't know if that's kind of your thing. Let me know which one you're more interested in. I think, not that I would upgrade from the 1050 to the 2060. That seems kind of like a waste, but the 2060 is sort of the GPU I wish I had. I bought the 1050 at the worst time last year. I built my first computer, which is the computer we're using here, in April of last year. So it was like $250 for the 1050 Ti. But, it was that or pay like $400 for the 1060, and I didn't have the money for that. I'm not too upset. It's working fine, and I'm happy with it. But I'm like, man, for $100 more, I could have had a 2060. That does look a little nicer. But the 1050 does me just fine, so I don't actually need to upgrade. So it's sort of like, I guess it's cool to know that maybe in a couple years I'll buy a used 2060 or 2070, or maybe I'll buy the next generation, or maybe I'll buy the AMD one. I like AMD. I'm an AMD fan. I just don't really use gaming GPUs. I don't game a lot. The computer I'm using now is not my first AMD computer. I had another Goodwill computer a year or two ago that was AMD, but I didn't build it. It was just some Bulldozer chip. I think it was 2-core, 4-thread, just for audio production. So the computer I'm using now was the first higher end AMD, the 1600X mid-range, 6 cores, 12 threads that I've ever had, and I am in love with it. But I've been an AMD fan for a lot of my life because when I was younger, my dad had an Athlon 64, and he was a programmer, and always told me all about how important 64-bit was and how important it was that AMD was leading the industry on that. So I've always had a soft spot in my heart for AMD, and I've been so happy that AMD is kicking ass with Ryzen, and I was so ready to see more Ryzen stuff, and I wanted to see it all, and we didn't get to see it all, and that's a bummer. But what we did get to see, and I will probably just edit into the video right here, was a Cinebench run. And they said, not specified clock speed, 8-core 16-thread chip going against the 9900K. Now, it's worth noting that base clock for the 9900K is a little bit overclocked. I think Hardware Unboxed and Gamers Nexus both did videos last year exposing the motherboards don't actually run at the 95-watt TDP they're supposed to. A lot of them have an unlocked power limit, so the boost is running a lot hotter and a lot higher clock. As well, Gamers Nexus revealed that a lot of the motherboards aren't using the base clock of 100 megahertz. A lot of them have a little bit higher of a base clock, which is minor, but is affecting the performance. So more than likely, when Lisa Su said stock, she actually meant slightly overclocked. But that only makes the Ryzen chip more impressive, and it's worth noting that the Ryzen chip is not finalized clocks either, so that could go up or down. Without the full information about what's going on in the chip, the benchmark doesn't mean very much. But what's exciting about the benchmark, especially, and I'll edit in the picture here, there's a picture of the die, or there's a video that she holds the die in her hand, and you can see that there's the spot where she says is the memory controller, and then the spot where she says is 8 cores, and then next to the 8 cores, the exact same size spot cut out where you could totally have another 8 cores. It's ultimately just a question of whether or not the motherboard's VRMs and the cooling can handle it, but there's going to be a new series of motherboards coming out, which will probably, I think the X570, right? Because I think X470 is the current AMD high-end, so there might be a higher-end VRM needed, but it'll fit in the AM4 socket, and it's more than likely going to have 12 and 16 cores since there's room for it. So a lot of people are kind of disappointed, how come they didn't share more at CES, and you know, I think they're just winning enough that they didn't have to. I think that's all it is. They said, this is our R5. If it is, it looks like the R5, given that there could be 8 more cores added on. But we're not going to tell anyone it's the R5. We're just going to say it's our 8 core against theirs, and let the world figure it out. And I think particularly because they're all, if anything Ardor TV said is true about the lineup in terms of core and clock speed, obviously the CES stuff was all wrong. But if everything else Ardor said was right, I like the idea that because it was leaked ahead of time, they didn't have to say any of that. Like, it's all in our mind, 16 cores, and, you know, we saw the picture, it's pretty clearly 16 cores, but they don't have to say it, and therefore they can just go, we don't know what you're talking about. They, like, if their R5 already beats Intel's best chip, why play the rest of their hand? A lot of people were saying, particularly since this is the new 7nm silicon, it's going to be a little faster, a little more power efficient. A lot of people are saying that if they announce the 12 and 16 core now, and they're not coming out for 6 months, that could affect the Threadripper sales for the 12 and 16 core chips. So, as well as the Ryzen 2 sales. So I think it's sort of like, since they knew they weren't going to launch in March, since they knew it was going to be 6 months out, they didn't want to play their hand. But I love the idea that they just went out there and kicked an i9's ass with an R5. To me, you know, as a long time AMD fanboy, if that's what happened, I'm very excited to see the future of AMD. So I've been Lars Schweighauser. I think I made a new channel for this, probably called Lars Talks Tech or something, just because I do a lot of podcasts, and the other YouTube channel has a lot of audio only podcast videos. So I wanted to do one more, and I like talking about tech. So if you guys are interested in talking about tech, we can do some more of this. I have some notes for, oh, that's what I have. I have this, not the most exciting little thing in the world, but it's just a little 5 Ethernet hub. So I just, a couple weeks ago, finally ran wired internet through the house over the ceiling to my room so I could have wired internet, because no one else wants wired internet in the house, but I didn't want to have the cable running over the floor. So stoked on that. But I have my laptop too, so I thought, get this, and I could plug the laptop and the desktop and the wired in, and I have 2 more ports, not that I'll probably ever use them. But I can also connect the two and do kind of shared drives, because most of my hard drives are in my desktop. So I just thought that'd be a fun way to do a little tech project, and maybe we can talk about the results. This thing was like $15 on Amazon, so definitely cheap. I'm curious if it's going to affect the speed of the internet. When I'm only using one of them, obviously using both of them will affect it. And I'm also curious how good the file transferring is going to be. I assume quicker than like plugging in a thumb drive or trying to use Google Drive, but again, and it is, I have Cat 6 cables. I bought these really cheap for a 5-pack of 5-foot Cat 6. And I've bought cheap 5-packs of XLR cables. In fact, this cable here is one of those. So let me tell you, these are probably hot garbage. But I don't think Ethernet really matters that much, as long as they are the full speed that they're supposed to be, and as long as every other device is also that full speed, it'll be fine. So that's my next project, and I'll cover any more interesting CES news. I don't know that there will be, because Intel kind of said nothing, and NVIDIA had the 2060, and but we'll see what happens when it happens. So bye.